All right. Hey, hey, hey. It is Rebecca Simon Peter joining you today for Leadership Mojo. I want to say happy spring to everybody and thank you so much for being with me. I really enjoy these broadcasts and getting to connect with you. So, as many of you know, I have been working on a book, Forging a New Path, moving the church forward in a post pandemic world. Every day, I feel like we're a little bit more post pandemic or post pandemic or something like that. And I'm very happy to say that the book is going to come out May 2022. And in working on this book, I came across so much interesting information. And I thought it would be really important to share that with you and to talk to as many church leaders as I could, considering the delicate state of affairs right now, the future of the church, impending splits, at least in the United Methodist Church. And no surprise here, everybody is in a state of ambiguity, and there's a lot of anxiety going on, and not just from the pandemic, but the uncertainty around what the United Methodist Church future holds, the uncertainty around the war in Europe, the suffering that is happening between Ukraine and Russia. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity. And in interviewing my United Methodist colleagues and colleagues from other denominations, I actually expected to hear a long list of worries and struggles and fears as we're coming through the pandemic. And while there definitely were some of those, I was surprised to hear what else people had to share with me. And that's what I want to share with you today, the surprising truth about how to do more with less. So we know it's been 2 long years, almost to the day, almost exactly to the day, since the World Health Organization pronounced the coronavirus, COVID-19, a global pandemic. And who would have imagined way back March 2020 where we would be today? I know when that was first announced, it was Wyoming. There wasn't much COVID going on here. I thought, a couple of months, we'll be through this. And then there was the word like, we may never have a vaccine. And I thought, oh my gosh, how do we ever get through this? But I think it's just safe to say that many of us thought this deadly virus would be gone by now, but it continues to spread. Businesses are really desperate to recover, and churches in particular are really feeling it. A lot of clergy are tired, and churches are asking, how do we do more with less? So, my new book, deals with the culture shifts that need to take place within a church to really withstand all the kinds of external circumstances, such as COVID-19, future pandemics, polarization, political stuff, whatever may come your way. And in my research, I thought, now who better to ask than currently the 150 people that we have participating in creating a culture of renewal? That's our 3-year group coaching program for church leaders, designed for church leaders by church leaders to, interrupt decline, increase vitality, and really empower churches to dream like Jesus. So I asked them, what would you like to see in a book about growing the post pandemic church? What would you like to see in a book about getting through the pandemic? And by far, the most compelling response that we got was, we'd like to know how to do more with less. We'd like to know how to do more with less. So, my follow up question for them was, well, what are you experiencing less of? Sort of playing dumb. But I wanted to hear straight from their mouths. What are you hearing less from? And for all the church leaders that are tuning in today, feel free to let us know, what are you seeing less of? Well, when I interviewed these pastors and church leaders, their answers were pretty consistent. And here's what it broke down to: less people, less money, and less experience dealing with technology in the way that it needs to be deployed right now. So I thought, well, that absolutely makes sense. We've all felt the lack of contact with others, especially during the time of quarantines, the loss of employment, the loss of income, the loss of life as we know it. And a lot of that could be wrapped up in saying the stress of dealing with unfamiliar situations and the pinch of resources that were once more plentiful, more readily available. Well, stick with me here. None of that was a surprise for me, but here's what was really neat. While the losses that everybody named were really tremendous and heartfelt, you could only really see the full picture by looking at the other side of the coin, if you will. So I asked these same church leaders, pastors, lay people, what have you found that you've had more of during the pandemic? What have you found that you've had more of? And here's where things got really, really interesting because not only were their answers more varied, but there was a lot more abundance contained in that set of answers than there was in the first set of answers. And they offered a surprising truth, which is what I'm really eager to share with you today. That even though people have less overall, they now have more of a sense of hope, more of a sense of togetherness. I thought there was going to be a less of a sense of togetherness, but there's almost a sense of, hey, we made it through. We've really shown our commitment. We have survived something we thought was unsurvivable that terrified us. We've joined arms and we've partnered with the Spirit, and we're coming through this thing. And so there was this beautiful sense of togetherness and hopefulness that was unlike anything people had experienced pre-pandemic. I also heard other answers that I thought were beautiful. Answers such as we have a tighter knit community now, tighter knit congregations. We have more ways to connect. We have more time with God and more ways to create community outside our buildings. Remember the time we couldn't even worship in our buildings? We really had to figure out. Well, that kind of creativity and that I don't know, that resilience, that grit that people had to dig down deep to discover, they've still got it. You've still got it. That's what they told us when I interviewed them. I say us because we had an interview team, but that's what they told us. We've got more of it. And I would say there's more grit, more resilience, and in many ways, there's more faith. So I was just blown away, and I still am. And I love sharing this with you because I think we can really use some positive, optimistic narrative right now because there's a lot of negativity out there. So while the focus has been on that negativity that has surrounded the pandemic and all that has been lost, these leaders were taking initiative. They were taking ownership. They were demonstrating their agency and intentionally looking for evidence of the kingdom of God around them. And man, did they find it. And what they and their churches have gained in these long 2 years. And it's not over, right? It's not over. But how cool for people to be able to see these gems of resilience and grit in the midst of really tough times. So it got me thinking, how can we utilize this time for learning? How can we utilize this time for more growing? And what are people really, really yearning for? Again, the truth may surprise you. I love these surprising truths and I love to share them with you. But what people really want, we discovered, is a deeper sense of togetherness with God, not just with each other, but with God. The searches during the shutdowns and the lockdowns, the searches for prayer and God on Google were record breaking. But it didn't just end then, like, let's search a prayer or let's figure out how to, pray God to kill off the pandemic, or this virus. It didn't end there. It's been this deep yearning that has continued. So people want to be in relationship with God. They want to feel God's presence. They want to know God is always by their side. Now, I'm speaking intentionally to church leaders today, laity, clergy, regional executives, people who make decisions, bishops. So you know the good stuff about God, right? You have that. You have that deep inner sense, at least from time to time. You have a sense of a calling. You have a sense that God is there. Guess what? Other people have it or they want it. And that's good news for us as the church because there should be no better place to fulfill this desire than within congregations, not necessarily buildings, but within congregations that congregate, that assemble, that gather for the purpose of deepening their connection with God through worship, through Bible study, through prayer, through confession, through being prompted by the Spirit, deep spiritual direction. So, it doesn't always happen though that people come to church and find God. I know it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's true. People don't always come to church and find God. Now, I've interviewed enough clergy and I've been in the ministry long enough to know that sometimes the answer, the problem, is with the leaders because we're so busy working for God that we don't actually work on our relationship with God. Now, that's not limited to clergy. That could be anybody who's really out to make a difference in the world. You could be so eager to do the work of God, you forget to connect with God. Well, guess what? When people come to our congregations, our churches, our Bible studies, our worship services, they can feel they can feel what's being done perfunctorily or dutifully or obligatorily and what's being done from the deep place of the spirit. I know. Sometimes we don't always want people to know that because we're doing our best. But it's interesting because people want to experience that. In the first place, they're going to aim to experience it when they come to churches with us and see if the vibe comes off of us, any of us that are sitting in the pews. So we need to take one more step, people. Church, we need to take one more step. We need to create the space for a deeper sense of togetherness with God by focusing on our own spirituality. Yep, we got to focus on our own spirituality. I love what one of my recent participants in a class said. Her takeaway was, I got more work to do, like to work on my own spirituality. Honestly, we all do. I mean, it's a game that's never over. It's a journey that's never done. It's a path that doesn't finish. So if you're feeling like, uh-oh, Rebecca is talking to me today, I am. I'm absolutely talking to you today. And I'm also talking to me today because I got to do the same work of deeply connecting with God. So in my new book, I write about 4 models of spiritual growth. And I want to share with you one of those models today. There's not enough time here to share all the models, but I think they're going to be really helpful for you. So, one of the models I want to talk about is the covenant group model. You may already be doing small groups, and your small groups may have a covenant, like a binding aspirational statement of values that guides you and that holds you together. But I want to encourage you to try this with your people because the covenant group model is really good. Because again, you may already have some of those pieces in place. This is now about deepening, strengthening, and clarifying what you're really up to together. So, the focus of the covenant group model is the desire to experience the presence of God. That's the focus of it. Sometimes people approach it as, I'm just going to use it to hold me accountable, or I want to get close to people. That's all good. You want that. But I really want to encourage you to take it that one step deeper to experience the presence of God. Okay, so it requires certain things that aren't necessarily needed just for showing up for worship. It requires honesty, a willingness to be honest, and to even be more honest than you thought you were going to have to be. It's like really transparent honesty. It requires vulnerability to reveal parts of yourself, your walk, your journey with God, your worries or your fears, to reveal that, to be vulnerable with the people in the group. And then it requires the willingness to be celebratory. This isn't just doom and gloom, and this isn't just, pulling out our deep dark secrets, but it's also being willing to celebrate the goodness of God and all the positive things that are happening. And then the fourth thing is a willingness to be accountable, to be held accountable and to hold others accountable. So the covenant group model provides a space to really dive deep beyond sort of daily life and the daily doings of one's life into the realm of the soul, the realm of the soul. So the experience is guided by 4 questions, and I want to give you those questions and then encourage you to put your answers in the chat. So let this be a time of covenanting with each other. So this is hybrid covenanting, right? Like I'm live right now. You may be live with me. You may be watching later, but this is interesting to be able to do this in a hybrid kind of setting that starts out virtually. So you ready for the first question? Here we go. Question number 1. How is it with your soul? How is it with your soul? So, the starting place for the spiritual journey is the core of the being. It's the wellspring from which life flows. It's that direct contact with God. And that's the first question we'll deal with is how is it with your soul? So let me take a moment now. Let me get honest. Let me get vulnerable, celebratory, and accountable. And let me just check in with myself and see how is it with my soul? Part of me wants to say, well, my soul is doing fabulous and beautiful because it's that divine part of me. And that's true. And then I also sense there's a little weariness. And I think there's a weariness because my soul's feeling like it's not getting fed enough. I'm definitely spending more time with God lately, but not as much time as my soul really yearns for. So I sense a bit of weariness. within the context of my soul, even as it's being fed deeply like an underground spring from God. The part where I'm feeding back into my soul, that's the part that's a little bit weary because it's not quite enough feeding going on. All right, so this is good. We're practicing honesty. Let's go to the second question. I want to see your answers too, by the way. So the second question is, where have the challenges been? Where have the challenges been? So here's where vulnerability really comes in. I don't know about you, but I, above all, want to look good. I want to look like I'm doing great and everything's good. But when we really get honest with each other and when we enter into this realm of the soul and the covenant group model, we gotta tell the truth. We gotta be vulnerable. So now we've got honesty and vulnerability. And when I tell you what have the challenges been in my life, last night I sat at my office at my desk and I felt a little bit woozy, almost like I was gonna pass out. I get that feeling every so often, low blood pressure, low blood sugar, something. I wasn't really sure what it was. And when I got home, I still felt a little bit like weak, physically weak. So that's definitely a challenge for me. I think it has to do with being tired. So I mentioned earlier about not spending quite enough time with God. I think I've been like burning the candle at both ends. So there's the bit about my soul, and I think my body's a little bit tired. So I took it easier this morning and last night, and I'm already feeling better. But that's a challenge I got to keep watching for. All right, let's look at the third question. The third question is, where have the joys been? So after honesty, after vulnerability, then comes celebration because in it all, through it all, God is at work. So we want to stop, we want to give thanks, we want to praise God because what we put our attention on really magnifies, it grows. And so we always want to have our attention on positive things in our life, even as we're dealing with challenges that may be there. So, where have the joys been in my life? Well, right now, my staff and faculty and I are getting ready for closing retreats for creating a culture of renewal, and we're planning fabulous retreats. So, I've gotten to see a lot of my faculty, a lot of my staff, and I love being around them. I just love the people. We're in covenant community together, and I love spending time with these folks, and I love planning for big spiritual celebrations where people get to celebrate their wins. So that's been wonderful. And of course, getting this book ready to go has been wonderful as well. So I celebrate with them and with you and within my own self the positive things that are happening and the way God is at work in my life. And then the fourth question, okay, this is the toughie, is what would you like to be held accountable for? Now, the quick answer is nothing. I don't want to be held accountable. Do you? Except the deeper answer is yes, do hold me accountable because that's how I grow. And above all, I know I'm made to grow, and I know you're made to grow. We're made to grow in the glory and the likeness of God. We're made to grow as human beings, as spiritual beings, as people who contribute to the planet. So, where do I want to be held accountable? Well, okay, I'll tell you, I made a commitment to a friend that I was going to start doing more arm exercises because I want to maintain my physical fitness and I'm getting ready for a backpacking trip at the end of the summer. So I committed to Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. I didn't do it this morning. So here's where I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to ask me in the chat window, Rebecca, did you do your arms exercises today? And you can also chat me up on Friday. Rebecca, did you get those done? So you've heard from me the spiritual, the soulful, the relational, the physical, and now you're hearing about fitness. So definitely, I want to be held accountable there. So we move from honesty to vulnerability to celebratory to accountability, and all four of those are an important part. Don't you feel like you already know me better? I feel like you should know me better because I've told you all this stuff about myself. And you know what? I feel closer to God because I'm not hiding anything and I'm just being out there. And that's so important. That's the spirituality part of connecting with God is we don't hide. All right. Because if we're hiding from ourselves, we're hiding from God. And it's hard to do spiritual work when you're in hiding. So hopefully you feel closer to me. I can't wait to read your answers, feeling closer to you. And there's just more presence of the Spirit here. So that's an example of the covenant group model and the way to really build on deepening spirituality and deepening community. So let's talk about taking next steps right now. Participating in a covenant group It's a powerful way to deepen your spirituality, and it's a powerful way to really build those bonds of community. Like here we are doing it online, virtually, right? Hybridly. But imagine doing that with people in your setting. It could be your family, could be a church group. I just think that's a really powerful way to build community. It puts you in the flow of unconditional love. It's got you in the wellspring of spirituality. And this is really where discipleship happens. Think about Jesus and the 12 and the 72 and the ways they connected with each other and the kind of level of depth and honesty that they had to have with each other. That's what's possible in your congregation. So even though you may feel like you have to do more with less than you did before the pandemic, the surprising truth here is that spirituality can give you more hope and more togetherness, hybrid, virtual, together physically than you ever had before. So, all right, we got a good taste. I didn't know I was going to do that today, but we got a good taste of the covenant group model today. And as you think about trying this with your people, I'd love to hear how it goes for you. You can share with me in the comments about what you learned, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how you tailored it to fit your particular group. And to learn more about how to do more with less, you could join me. It's not too late to sign up. I've got an upcoming workshop with Market Square Publishers. You can go to, I think we're going to put a link here in the window, in the chat window, and I think it's clergycontinuingeducation.com. Try that or look in the chat and see what it says there. And I'm going to be teaching a class on that tomorrow. I'd love to have you there. It'd be really fun to share that with you. And lastly, if you want a reminder before I go live next week, just hit the like button. And for real, I've been trying to have this happen for a couple of weeks, but for real next week, I'm going to be joined by a couple of colleagues. And we're going to be talking, because it is Women's History Month, we're going to be talking about resilience. We're going to be talking about grit. We're going to be talking about the praises and the paradoxes and the pitfalls of the spiritual journey. So I'm going to be joined by Bessie Hamilton and Reverend Bessie Hamilton and the Reverend Dr. Jackie King. It's going to be terrific. Please do join us. We're going to be together for a good 45 minutes next week, and I don't want you to miss it. So hit the like button, bring your friends, and let's talk. Let's just share some stories about how we've been in ministry, how we got to ministry, and what's next for us. All right. Thanks so much for joining me for Leadership Mojo. Always a pleasure to be with you. And I look forward to reading your comments and seeing you next week. Take good care. Okay. Bye.